Welcome to the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live. We've just wrapped up Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final, and is the Florida Panthers taking the win in Edmonton, 5-2 the final score. So Florida now with a 3-2 lead in the series and a chance to win back-to-back Stanley Cups, taking it back to South Florida for Game 6. All right, first things first. Avery, you were there. I heard what the atmosphere was like before the game. Saw it all over Twitter. What happened in that first period? Because it felt like the decibels were draining throughout this game, maybe similar to some of the energy from the Oilers. I know there was a quick turnaround between last game and tonight. But talk to me a little bit about what the building was like, how the crowd was struggling to get into it, and just sort of what you saw from Edmonton in that first period.
Yeah, when Brad Marchand scored that opener, you could feel the crowd just deflate when Marchand got past Matthias Ekholm and put that one past Calvin Pickard. It felt like, I mean, Edmonton had a few chances on Bobrovsky early. You saw that puck bouncing around in the Florida zone. But once that first goal beat Pickard, you could feel the crowd like, oh, no, not again, especially not again with Brad Marchand, someone who has been this series an Oilers killer. You could feel Oilers fans saying, not him, not again. And then Sam Bennett scores again. It felt like any level of momentum this team had was gone within the first 10 minutes of hockey.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seemed like, again, this was 4 straight games now that Florida gets the first goal. And we've obviously seen what Edmonton is able to do when they're behind. They have the ability to come back. But at a certain point, it really starts to become difficult. Add in the fact that there was definitely some fatigue. I saw fatigue on both sides, but certainly it was affecting the Oilers. Michael, what did you sort of see from the early stages of this game that maybe put Edmonton in a position where they just had too big of a hole to climb out of, given the circumstances?
Yeah, it was a frustrating game for the Oilers. They couldn't get anything going, Katie. And it's weird because we saw it last game where their speed and their skill took over. And you know, I actually thought the Oilers had a lot of jump going into just off the initial puck drop. Like McDavid was buzzing around, but it really seemed like every time they tried to get some momentum going, even after, you know, they finally did score, the Panthers were back at it. And, you know, Avery brought up Brad Marchand, like, and I even saw your tweet out there. You know, he's looking like, you know, it's going to be a neck and neck race if the Florida Panthers win between him and Sam Bennett. So, you know, the best players need to stand up and play their best hockey in the Stanley Cup final. Right now, we're getting that out of the Panthers. It's not coming consistently enough from the Oilers. So, you know, here we are again. Like, they're going to have to respond, obviously, in Game 6. Their backs are against the wall. But, you know, I hope that Avery's prediction comes true and we do get a Game 7 here.
Yeah, we were having our little fun before we got on here live, and Avery does believe that this is going 7. Avery, outside of the fact that we know there's skill on both of these teams and we know the history of this series from last year, is there something that is making you believe this, that you feel like Edmonton has it? Because it's going to be difficult going back to South Florida. The Panthers are a team all year. We've talked about when the blood is in the water, they certainly seem to smell it and to be able to capitalize. What has you convinced that Edmonton can make this thing go 7?
In general, this series has been one where no team can keep momentum from one game forward. I mean, we saw Florida getting wins, Edmonton getting wins. No team in the series be able to put together 2 straight games makes you think, yeah, they got this in the bag. It's been a funny series in that way. And I do think that in Game 6, you can only contain McDavid for so long. We saw Connor score late. You can only contain McDavid and Draisaitl for so long. They're trying to get their chances. I do think they do wake up in Game 6, and it's going to be a game that, again, will be fun to watch, and will one that'll force a Game 7 in my mind.
Avery, what are you seeing out of Edmonton's defense there, where a guy like Marchand's able to kind of walk around Wallman on one goal, able to split the D right off the face-off on another? Like, those are the kind of goals that, you know, you tip your cap to Marchand for being able to pull it off. Yeah. But, you know, how much responsibility are you holding on the Oilers, saying, how do you let this even happen?
No, there's definitely quite a bit. And you're seeing sometimes the Oilers D is playing a little bit too high. They're a step behind Florida too much. And you're seeing at times in this series, Michael, Edmonton defenders are watching the puck a little bit too much and are getting burned on that an aspect. And guys like Matthias Ekholm, someone who, when he came over from Nashville a couple of years ago, was great. You're seeing that age catch up to Ekholm to an extent. You see him, the age and injury, catch up a little bit, which is too bad because couple of years ago and last year, he was that great shutdown D-man. So you're seeing the injuries catching him to Ekholm at the wrong time right now in this series.
We got to give a shout out to the veterans in this series right now, though, because we got Brad Marchand, 10 goals. Corey Perry also now has 10 goals in the postseason. Connor McDavid only has 7. I mean, again, you need depth guys stepping up, but this is getting out of control. You've got these guys, I don't want to call them old because they're not old for the rest of us, but for the NHL, they certainly are. I guess let's start with Marchand because we teased out the idea of this Conn Smythe. I tweeted it out earlier. But if Florida does win the Stanley Cup with the goals he's scoring, so I saw a stat online, Jackie Redmond posts this out there. 10 goals this postseason, 7 of Marchand's 10 goals have given Florida a lead. Those are so crucial. He's not just scoring during garbage time. He's changing the game for the Panthers. If Florida wins, Michael, could we see a serious chance that Marchand is the Conn Smythe?
I think so. I still think for me, Sam Bennett's got the edge just because he's not only scoring, he's scoring on the road, Katie, which are huge. But let's talk about Brad Marchand. Like 21 goals in the regular season. There was a real big feeling out there that his best days were behind him to the point where, heading into UFA status, he was seemed as, pretty much an afterthought. You're thinking maybe he goes back to Florida, maybe he even, would go back to Boston on a cheap deal. If I'm Brad Marchand right now and I'm his agent, I'm expecting offers from pretty much all 32 teams. And I'm expecting the kind of offers that are going to probably put him up there maybe as a top 3 free agent pick this summer. That's how much he's really kind of revitalized himself because, like I said, it looked like he was past his prime. Even at the Four Nations, he wasn't a top line player. He wasn't really even a second line player. He was more of that third line kind of check-in line role. And, to see him come out with the kind of goals that he's scoring now in the playoffs, especially in the Stanley Cup final, like I said, he's turned back the clock. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the names that are competing in this Stanley Cup final, there are absolute all-stars all across the board, future Hall of Famers all across the board. But Marchand's making a case that he should be one of those guys, certainly impressing, certainly putting himself on the map. This is a series we could have easily just been McDavid, Draisaitl, Barkov show, but no, we're talking about Marchand. We're talking about Sam Bennett. Here we got a good comment. Where does Marchand in the trade to get him to Florida rank among the best trade deadline acquisitions ever? And we're putting that one in a great scope. Ever. Well, now you're putting us to work, but it certainly is coming across as one of the best, considering they didn't really have to give up anything to get him. Part of that was because he said, I'm literally only going to Florida. So Boston didn't have a choice, but certainly looking like a really good one. Don't you think, Avery?
Yeah, no, of course. But, I know if you're Don Sweeney, that is tough because what you got back wasn't that much. And you're seeing Brad Marchand turn back the clock. If you're a Bruins fan right now, I know if you cheer for the Bruins, you're sick, you're ill, you're thinking, oh, come on. We couldn't have gotten back Brad Marchand, really?
I saw a tweet that said that, by the way, it's rained every single weekend in Boston since Marchand got traded. And I'm like, that's the feeling that's happening up there right now, watching him go out and do what he's doing. All right, here's an important question that I want to get to right away because we have a goalie discussion to have. For Game 6, what are we thinking? The broadcast tonight started hinting at thinking it should be Skinner going back in net. Pickard comes out. What do you guys think? Avery?
Yeah, I do feel like this team goes back to Stuart Skinner. They go back to the guy Skinner number 1. I do think so. I really do think it's a Stuart Skinner game going into Game 6. I don't know if Knobloch gives Pickard one more game. I mean, he maybe should, but I got a gut feeling that they want to say, hey, Stu had a break. Stu had that one game off. He's good to go again. So I do think it's Stuart Skinner in Game 6 starting in net.
You know what? Normally that would sound like just complete bonkers there, Avery, but you look at how the Edmonton Oilers have handled their goaltenders, and I'm kind of agreeing with you. I actually
Mhm.
feel like Stuart Skinner going back might give them another jolt. And, if things don't go well, and Katie, am I wrong here where if he has a bad first period, would you even go back to Pickard again?
I mean, I think the one thing that Edmonton has going for them is that, maybe certain teams, like this uncertainty between who is our goalie would rattle them because like there is that like, oh, I don't know if we can trust anyone in the net. I think they just trust both guys. And it's just more a matter of like the momentum swing for the team. I definitely agree that I do think it could actually be Skinner. I don't know if I would have said that. I figured it was just let's ride this Pickard train all the way to the sunset. But if Skinner does go back in, I do think it's another situation like you said where you have to have a short leash. But it's such a slippery slope because then you win game 6 and then what happens? I mean, eventually it's getting a little bit out of control. What do you do?
Yeah, there's one thing about riding the hot hand, but then this is just like
Yeah.
other level. Like I don't think I've ever seen this in a playoffs where you'd go back and forth to a guy. Now, granted, the reason why Cal Pickard, gave up the net originally after going in that LA series was because of an injury. So he's not injured
Mhm.
now. And Avery, am I wrong? Like he didn't look bad tonight. Then again, neither did Skinner the night before, and they swapped out goalies before. But what did you actually make of Cal Pickard's actual performance today?
Yeah, no, Calvin made some high danger saves. He looked okay. Like this game wasn't lost on Calvin Pickard. This game was lost more on the power play, not getting anything going. Only 10 shots through 2 periods. Calvin Pickard had a very good game this far. They could have if they were able to capitalize on the power play or get a few chances. We're probably waiting for overtime to start right now, or Edmonton wins a 3-2 or 4-2 game. So the blame to me does not go on Calvin Pickard whatsoever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
and you know what? And you can't even point to Bobrovsky as for stealing one here because like it
Hmm.
looked like he was en route to a shutout, and then you look at the shots and it's like, okay, Edmonton gets 3 shots in the first period, then
Yeah.
8 shots in the second, and then they finally kind of wake up in the third where they
Mhm.
get 10 shots, and McDavid finally puts them on the board. But really, like it was as easy a night for Bobrovsky as he's ever had in these playoffs.
Yeah, there were definitely like a few key saves maybe towards the end when you saw Edmonton kind of picking things up, but it felt like this was a night where like on both sides, truthfully, goaltending was not the reason that a game was won or lost by any means. Avery, you made a good point, and I had this written down. I wanted to bring it up because I heard them talking about it a little bit throughout the game. The power play. Again, we've got so much skill on the Edmonton side. Did it feel like to you they were doing too much, overpassing? Just seemed like they were getting better chances through the second and third chance of the power plays they got, but they still just it was it their fault? Like what were they doing that just didn't seem to be clicking, or was this a matter of Florida's PK really doing a good job?
I would say in a major way, it's Edmonton again trying to be too fancy, trying to look for that perfect pass, that perfect play, get the puck in the net. I mean, when we've seen Edmonton do less in the power play. We've seen them score quite a bit, but when they look for that extra pass, you see a Florida defender get a stick in the way, deflect that cross ice pass. I mean, there's a sequence where you saw the Florida defender lost their stick. And Edmonton's looking for the pass. It's like, what are you doing? Like, you have a player on Florida without their stick. Stop looking for the extra pass, get a shot on net. And this team overthought things on the man advantage way too much, way too often, Katie.
Well, a reminder that the Playoff Frenzy Live is presented by Sticks.com. Don't break the bank on Sticks when you can get a pro level composite stick without the pro price tag at Sticks.com. That's Stix.com. Make sure to go check it out. All right, I want to bring up a comment that was made. So, Connor McDavid, after that interesting game 3, said, our best hasn't been here yet. It's still coming. We obviously saw the great comeback in game 4. But that being said, they also had to claw out of a pretty bad hole. Tonight, obviously, is not going to be something you point to as your best postseason performance. So, are we still potentially waiting to see the best that Edmonton has? Because they are straight up out of time now to find it. Don't you think, Michael?
I think so. And if I'm in, like, I'm seeing some of the comments in the chat here, and as bad as they played in game 3, at least they were fighting, like physically fighting at the end. And
Mhm.
you could blame the refs partially because you're like, okay, how many penalties or how many power plays is Florida going to get? This was a totally different scenario. This was just an Oilers team that looked flat, that looked like they couldn't figure out how to break through Florida's defense. And I think that's the scary thing is, you can go from how the Oilers played in game one and two to how they played in game three. They rebound after a terrible first period in game four, but then here we are again. And, the Oilers just looked so confused out there. And again, like, I don't know if it's Florida really just frustrating them, or this was one of those ones where, again, Edmonton putting together what was arguably one of their worst performances of the playoffs. And you're saying to yourself, this was maybe not a must win, but it was a pivotal game because, again, now Florida's one win away from winning a back-to-back Stanley Cup, whereas Edmonton's looking at this going, you have to win two straight. And how do you win two straight against the Florida Panthers team that really, they make more adjustments than any other team out there?
They never lose two in a row. That's the other challenge. I mean, they genuinely are so good at bouncing back if you can force a loss on them. So we got some fiery Panthers fans in the chat. I just saw one comment that said Edmonton folded like a love letter. So they're excited about this cup coming back to South Florida. Here's a good comment. I want to start with you, Avery. Who's most to blame for Edmonton's poor performance tonight?
I don't think there's one player to really blame. It was a collective of, I think for sure you can't blame the goaltending, but I think in large part it was a lot of the guys up front who just didn't get enough shots on Bob, because the games that they've won, they've gotten at least 25 shots or more. They peppered Bob in other games in this series. You're not going to win a game against Florida getting 18, 19 shots. It's not going to get it done. Needed more traffic in front of Bob, needed more than 3 shots in period, 10 shots in a period. I mean, game one and game two, we saw Edmonton on the verge of getting 20 shots in a frame. That's what you need to get to Sergei Bobrovsky. They didn't get that. So the guys up front, the collective among the forwards, I would say any blame that would go among them first, because their game was not good enough and was essentially a must-win game at home tonight.
And why is it that Edmonton's always, it just seems like they're always waiting for 97 and 29 to spur the offense. And I get it. McDavid and Draisaitl are the two guys that you're going to lean on the most, but you see Florida, like, it's not just Barkov. It's not just Tkachuk. I know Reinhart gets a goal tonight. So does Bennett, but we're talking about a ton of depth that they're getting goals from here. And Brad Marchand, he is a depth player on this team. He's a depth player. And when I look at the Edmonton Oilers and, let's really circle the name Evander Kane, who hasn't had a great series and it continues to just struggle. 1 goal, 5 games. He's got no assists. I'm looking at what he did tonight. 14 minutes and change in ice time. He didn't even have a single shot. So, I don't know why Evander Kane has gone missing in a series where it just seems like this was tailor-made for the kind of physicality and the kind of game that he plays.
Well, I mean, earlier in the week when we had Bruce Boudreau on the show, he said the same kind of thing, that this should have been a series that he thrived in, but this is sort of a part of what's frustrating about him as a player, is that sometimes he does have these moments where he just doesn't show up when you keep expecting him, when you want that from him. Another point is, let's talk about just these teams, their makeup. Florida has gotten so much credit for the leadership they have, the kind of composure that they have as a team, the guys that are stepping up and saying things on the ice, off the ice, in the room. It feels like this is a moment where Edmonton needs that next level of character to step up, and it maybe has been missing, and maybe it is still a missing link. But Michael, in your opinion, what can the 29s and the 97s do in this moment? Because as much as you want to have depth at this point, it's a game 6. This is it. Your season is on the line. Like, it's time. You have to be the guys. What are you doing? What are you saying?
I think it's lead by example. And to your point, Katie, you're lucky if you're the Edmonton Oilers that you do have McDavid, that you do have Draisaitl, that you've got even an Evan Bouchard. Like, those guys are so dynamic and so skilled that they literally can, win a game for you and, win a series. And, unfortunately for the Oilers, it really is up to their 2 biggest stars to get the job done. And, is that fair? Well, how much are they getting paid? It's fair when you're loading up your salary in 2 different guys. So, I don't know how you feel, Avery. Like, it really, for me, it's up to McDavid. It's up to Draisaitl to pull them out of this.
Yeah, no, and Connor McDavid, we know he scored tonight, but in this series, when it comes to goals, he hasn't been able to get much against Florida. He's getting points, he's getting assists, but when it comes to goals, you need more from him. I mean, Leon has scored before. He's gotten a couple of overtime winners, but again, in a game 6, you're going to need your leaders, the two biggest guys, to find a way to step up. They're going to have to. They have no choice. It's do or die now on Tuesday night.
Well, this is also a game that, we talk about all the time, the legacy that Connor McDavid is going to leave behind. This is a game that can be very defining for that moment because, again, until he has a Stanley Cup, that's the one thing that is always going to, hold him back from the complete legacy status. Not that he has to earn it. There's no difficulty there. I mean, he reached 150 postseason points tonight, third fastest of all time. But it's all about the Stanley Cup. So, again, this is kind of a moment where things can change. Michael, I guess, is it pressure? Can he handle that? Is this something that we think is going to affect him?
No, I think this is, I think he thrives in these moments.
Yeah.
You see his performance at the Four Nations, and it seemed like all eyes were going to be on him, and he had to score that big goal, and he did come through. And we've seen this from Connor McDavid at World Junior Championships. Heck, we saw it last year. The team was down 3-0, and I would argue that it was Connor McDavid really, single-handedly pulled them into that Game 7 scenario. So, I know, McDavid and, his locker room speech to dig deep is, it gets played a lot. And I imagine he's probably going to be delivering a similar type of speech going into Game 6. And, if they do get a Game 7, he's probably going to be the same thing. But, I think he wants to be that guy who's got his, the puck is on his stick, and he's the guy having his moment at the Stanley Cup final. Like, it's funny. Like the Oilers go to the Cup final last year, and I don't know how many people expected them to go back to back. I certainly didn't. If they don't get the Stanley Cup championship this year, there's no guarantee that they're going back next year or in the foreseeable future. Like it is pretty rare. I know Florida's making it look easy. So is Tampa, heck, even Vegas, but it's pretty rare that you go back to the final. Even more rare that you go back to back. So, this really could be McDavid's last chance in a while. And if he doesn't get it done, he's going to be thinking about this for the rest of his career.
Yeah, certainly is one of those moments where you see Florida going and making it, like you said, look easy, but it is not. And teams go through full blown rebuilds before they even get back for an opportunity like this. That's the nature of the game. Contracts expire, guys get older, things change. All right, we've talked a lot about Edmonton. Before we wrap this up, I want to talk just a little bit about Florida, right? I mean, what is their mindset? What is their game plan? It feels like they are just going to keep doing exactly what they've done all playoffs long. And they're not even worried about it. Like, this is a situation where, like, of course they want to win in 6, but Paul Maurice is perfectly comfortable going to 7, right? It's almost like they find a way to take pressure off of themselves, even when they're in these types of clinching scenarios. So, Avery, in your mind, what version of the Florida Panthers are we going to see hitting the ice for the first period? Because I have a feeling they're going to be just absolutely insane.
No, of course. You're going to see Florida again, Katie, coming out hard in the forecheck, a team that will find a way to get their sticks moving, active sticks, deflecting passes, making things hard for the Edmonton Oilers. And again, running the body. We saw again, a couple of times they got away with a few calls. We saw Sam Bennett running over Troy Setcher. No harm, no foul. It is what it is. That's if you can get away with that, go ahead and do that. If it's not called, hey, that's how it is. And Florida can do that. Florida can play that game. And that physical play of Florida, Edmonton many times has been unable to match. And when Edmonton tried to match that game, it's gone horribly wrong for the Oilers. So you're going to see that heavy forecheck. You're going to see guys like Gustav Forsling step up, Sam Bennett step up, and Brad Marchand once again. If Brad Marchand cannot be contained, and same for Sam Bennett, same for Sam Reinhart, if they're on fire again on Tuesday night, it's over. It's finished.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. All right. Well, Avery, we know how you feel. We know that in your heart you want and know this is going 7. But Michael, before we wrap this up, what's your gut telling you? Could things be over in 6?
I feel like I know Edmonton's been able to claw back, but I feel like, and we talked about this, Katie, scoring first is going to be so important for the Oilers. So they need to get that first goal in Game 6. And I think if they can kind of control the game and not have to fight back from a deficit, which just seems like they're doing that the entire series now.
Yeah.
They're going to make life easier on them. I still think, and I'm with Avery, I think this does go game 7. I think we're in for a heck of a series. And, it's too bad that, tonight was kind of boring. Let's be honest. Like, if you're a fan of hockey, you were tuning in for a Saturday night, like expecting, what's all this fuss about? I want to see what Connor McDavid's going to do. I want to see Leon Draisaitl. I want to see this battle that everyone's talking about. You were let down tonight because it wasn't a good game. Like, take away those Brad Marchand actual individual efforts. The flow of the game was terrible. It was so bad that I was actually hoping for a penalty because I was like, call some penalties. You can actually see, some power plays here. You'd never expect me to hear that from me. So, I just hope we're entertained. And I'd love it to go back to Edmonton for a 7.
Yeah, crazy Saturday nights are out. Tune in for awesome Tuesday nights. That's where it's at. That's where the action is. That's where we'll get it.
Sleepy Saturdays and
Sleepy Saturdays. Well, we've got plenty of action. Don't worry. There could still be 2 more games left, but the Stanley Cup could be coming out of its case on Tuesday night. We shall see. Guys, good stuff. Avery Lewis McDougall, Michael Tracos. I'm Katie Gauze, and thank you for watching the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live. We'll be back. We've got you covered. Come join us after Game 6, but until then, get some sleep. Have a great night.